Alright, hello and welcome everyone. So this is just a bit of a disclaimer before the actual video starts. This is a very different video than my typical just recording me playing a game or whatever random game I feel like playing that day. This is a video that took planning and actual editing besides the haha funny zoom and comedic cuts, so to speak, if you could call my videos comedy. Come on, it's very, very still. But yeah, this is a much more sophisticated video, which really isn't the word to use because then again, in the end, I am just talking about a video game. But it's a very important video game, and I just wanted to make this video. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this video, and I will see you next time with probably haha funny moments in video game video. So yeah, goodbye. For as long as I can remember, I've always been a huge fan of the Elder Scrolls series. The first game I ever played was Oblivion back in 2008, and I probably have 1,000+ hours in total invested in Skyrim, an 8-year-old game I've played since release to this very day, as you can tell from the previous 3 videos I've released on my channel. I've gone back and played every single game in the main series, from Arena to Daggerfall to Morrowind and obviously the more modern ones. But in 2014, a game released in the franchise that is much, much different than any other game released previously. I'm of course talking about The Elder Scrolls Online, and as many of you may know, this isn't exactly the most revered entry in the franchise, especially around release. It was criticized, rightfully so, for the many, many legitimate faults the game had. The quest design, the story, how nothing you did felt meaningful opposed to the other games in the franchise where the player played a major role in the story of those games. While in this game, you just feel so small and unimportant since there were millions of other people doing the exact same thing you were doing right beside you. The game was subscription-based, buggy to all hell, and horribly monetized with pathetic excuses of DLC. Most of all, biggest gripe most people had with ESO was change. It was, and to this day, is drastically different than any game ever released in the franchise, due to it being an MMO. When every single other entry in the franchise was a deep, rich, expertly crafted single-player experience. Not to mention how ZeniMax designed this particular experience poorly and lazily, seemingly just cashing in on the incredible success of Skyrim. It wasn't at all worth the $60 entry fee, followed by a $15 monthly subscription, when there were much better alternatives to who this game was trying to find an audience in. MMO fans who had a much better time in games like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, which had much more content and polish to it than ESO at the time, and Elder Scrolls fans who had a much better experience in the polished and detailed Skyrim or even earlier entries. Point is, this game was a complete flop at release, and no one in 2014 thought it would ever live up to its namesake and polish that an Elder Scrolls game is expected to have. However, it's 2020 now, almost 6 years after the horrendous launch, and as we sit here on the brink of the game's next major expansion, Greymoor, I want to explain to you how the game is not only in a much better state, but is what I would argue the best MMO experience you could get on the market by a long shot. I feel that the best way I could argue this point is by going over the 3 main pillars of the game and explain in detail how each has drastically improved, those pillars being the PvE experience, the PvP experience, and the general multiplayer / Elder Scrolls hybrid experience that had finally managed to satisfy MMO fans and Elder Scrolls fans alike. Not just one or the other, but both. So to start off, let's talk about the PvE experience, which has definitely gone through some of the most changes since its release back in 2014, and in turn a massive part of the ESO experience that has drastically improved. For starters, the combat itself is much more fluid and enjoyable. Every single weapon class and skill in the game feels so unique to use and not only feel effective, but are also genuinely fun to use. Speaking of skills, the game has a much better class system than that of release. There are now 6 complete, unique, different, and interesting classes that each have their balanced strengths and weaknesses. For example, the Nightblade class is perfect for doing as much damage as possible and to as many enemies as possible in the shortest amount of time. However, they can't do any healing at all to themselves or other players and are the very definition of a class canon, meaning they deal tons of damage but will shatter if they encounter an enemy that deals a moderate amount of damage. Every single class has its pros and cons across the board except for one class, the Warden, which is moderate in damage, healing, and tanking, but isn't exactly fantastic in any one of those categories, so again, it kind of balances itself out. This new class system makes every playthrough unique, and leveling new characters not only fun, but interesting as you strive to discover the capabilities of each class as you play them. Speaking of playing through the game and replayability, it's important that I talk about the biggest part of the PvE experience of ESO, the quest system. The quests when the game first came out were very quick, or short, boring, and not very rewarding at all, as you were typically given a small sum of gold and a new weapon or piece of armor that you would likely use for 20 minutes before finding an upgrade. Not to mention how the actual stories these quests revolved around felt pointless, with irrelevant and forgettable characters that no one really cared for because of how underdeveloped these stories actually were. All these factors made the quest feel meaningless and plain forgettable, which is drastically different than the typical Elder Scrolls experience many fans were so used to. The quests nowadays are a completely different story. See what I did? Different story, both physically and metaphorically. The game is now chock full of quests that are not only much longer and much more rewarding, but also somehow feel much more meaningful with fully developed stories and interesting characters, with some exceptions, because those regular quests when the game first came out are still there. But they're actually rewarding now and make for a much more memorable experience. I will never forget when I was exploring the highlands of northern Elsewhere and I stumbled upon a Daedric god that had disguised itself as a cat and had trapped a woman in its realm. And it was all up to me to save that woman by distracting the cat god with everyday items that cats get distracted by, like milk or string and I think a mouse. Yeah, this is just one of the countless examples of how this game gets creative with its writing, and is now up to par with such writing when compared to the quests of Skyrim or Oblivion, with some examples being even more so, and even fewer less so. Now it's time for me to talk about the meat and potatoes of every single MMO, because like I said, this is both an Elder Scrolls game and an MMO game. What every single player grinds to get to, and what some may argue is the entire point of playing through an MMO, the endgame. Where some games may lack in an endgame, Destiny, sorry. ESO has an incredible abundance of endgame content. You're looking at an entirely new experience in the regular game, and it isn't solely with stronger enemies and quests and better rewards, but literally an entirely new experience. It all starts when you go just beyond level 50 and gain access to champion ranks. From now on, every time you quote-unquote level up, you will be granted champion points, which you can use to put into brand new passive skill trees that you've now unlocked, which will improve multiple aspects about your character, from increasing your raw damage output to reducing the cost of abilities and stamina magicka, or giving you less expensive roll and stuff like that. Those new buffs are, of course, to prepare you for the endgame content itself. What many players look forward to in the endgame are trials, which are the ESO equivalent of raids from Destiny or World of Warcraft. These raids are 12-player, high-risk, high-reward dungeons that require team coordination and a good amount of dedicated time to complete. Very few things in video games are as satisfying as completing one of these trials and getting the weapon or piece of armor you want, as the best armor and weapon sets are found in these trials, because they're actually rewarding. And the experience within these trials themselves should be a pretty solid reason to go through them, even if you don't exactly have a solid raid team. So basically, if you want to play with your friends, but you're all kind of mediocre, if you take your time in the trial, you will get it done, and you'll just have a grand old time. Another part of the endgame content includes veteran dungeons, which takes the regular dungeons in the base game that many players have likely already completed and gives them an entirely new story to complete and bosses to defeat, and of course much better gear to earn, especially through the undaunted dailies, which give you the best weapons and armor in the game, or mostly armor, but yeah, you get the point. This is redone in almost every single dungeon, except for a few of the DLC dungeons, which themselves are meant for high-level players. There are many more areas of the endgame content that I'd like to cover, such as incredibly rewarding dailies, dragon fights, arenas, and much more, but for the sake of time and my sanity when editing this, it's time for me to finally move on to the other pillar of the game, being the player versus player experience, which I have a good amount to talk about there. Alright, so starting off with this part, I'm going to be completely honest. I've never been that much into PvP when it comes to MMOs. Like, I enjoy the player versus player action in Destiny and the Crucible, and I do enjoy my fair share of competitive first-person shooters, but in games that are comprised of a massive PvE experience, I don't typically spend too much time in the PvP area, especially if that area isn't exactly polished or fulfilling. This was the case for ESO for a very long time, but in the last couple months I've spent about 50 hours in Cyrodiil, the entire province in the game where each of the three alliances, the Aldmeri Dominion, the Ebonheart Pact, and the Daggerfall Covenant, one of which is chosen by the player to be a part of when creating a character, and is basically the entire purpose of the alliance system is PvP. That's only when it really matters, at least. They all duke it out for territory, for forts and citadels, and I really can't believe how in-depth this PvP experience or how fun it's become. Like, it's insane. When the game first came out, I spent some time in PvP, but not too much time, as there were many glaring issues with it, just like the rest of the game. For one, the game was incredibly imbalanced at the time, with some weapons and classes being blatantly more powerful than others, making the PvP system having very little skill involved. And the meta was just so lopsided and stupid. It was basically just dependent on who has a bigger stick or who could spam abilities more. And I doubt this was an intentional aspect, but the developers took all the time in the world in trying to improve it, basically rendering the PvP part of the game boring and unplayable to many for a very long time, because you had to grind hundreds of hours if you even wanted to stand a chance. But, like, as with everything else in this game, 6 years have gone by. Almost 7. Just over 6, yes, have gone by, and so much has changed. Like, a stupid amount has changed. For one, as I mentioned earlier, the game has balanced itself out over time, giving every class an even playing field, an important purpose on the battlefield. For example, you got the tanks to obviously tank all the incoming damage from siege equipment and all that stuff, and you got the healers healing everybody because you move in large packs usually. And yeah, the game is also much more based upon an individual player's skills and experience in the game, and less on who has a more powerful weapon or armor piece. To be successful in PvP, you must not only hone your skills, but learn how to properly use them and when to use them, all while learning how to use them and not completely drain your stamina or magic gun trying to kill a single player, leaving you easy prey to another attacker, since you will most likely be facing more than one opponent during any given encounter. You must also learn how to balance all those things out, your skills and the way you deal damage or your purpose. Balance all that out with blocking, dodging, timing, all those evasive maneuvers, again without completely draining your stamina or magicka. It's truly become an in-depth experience, and an amazing one, in fact. There are few things more fun in the game than taking down a rival faction's fort or being a part of this massive conquest across the map, constantly clashing with the enemy. The map in Cyrodiil was created almost perfectly, not only modeling itself properly after the Cyrodiil and Oblivion, but also having countless structures and general geography that are important in PvP, such as choke points on bridges, across rivers, and using the geography of the map to stall an entire enemy advance with a couple of well-placed siege equipment. In addition to the main PvP area, there is also the Battlegrounds matchmaking game, which pits 8 players against each other in evenly divided teams, so teams of 4 on some rather small maps, and it's really just a lot of fun, and especially for beginners at PvP and professionals alike. Like, if you're just starting out in PvP, you're probably going to want to do Battlegrounds because it's more I want to say, like, the path is more blatant, while in Cyrodiil, like where the actual PvP is going on, action could be happening all over the map, where in this it's kind of like team deathmatch, as opposed to like comparable to Fortnite. I don't play Fortnite, okay? I swear to God. I was just comparing it. Don't get me wrong, PvP in this game is difficult to get good at. Or it's easy to learn, but hard to master, and you will die a lot, I can guarantee you that. But it's still worth a shot to anyone who has stuck to PvE for the most part, not only for the rewards, but the experience alone. Like, when you pull off your first 1v10, it's probably one of the best feelings you'll have playing an online game. I'm just saying. So, now I'm going to move on to Part 3, talking about the actual hybrid experience and how it works out. Alright, so I'm probably going to have the least amount of things to say. This is kind of like a segue into wrapping up the video, but so, how does the Elder Scrolls / MMO hybrid work out? This game is the perfect blend and balance between trying and achieving at being a good MMO with thousands of hours of content to keep a dedicated player busy, but also makes all that content live up to the typical Elder Scrolls standards many veterans like myself are so used to. The game creates an enjoyable experience for everyone who plays it, and thanks to fantastic DLCs such as Morrowind, Summerset, Elsewhere, Dragonhold, and all that they're genuinely worth the price, and countless free updates, the game is a perfect example of a beloved franchise turned MMO. The complete opposite of where Fallout attempted and failed so miserably, and still did. Wastelanders didn't fix anything. Just added more things for them to screw up. So what's responsible for the game's redemption? Has it been slowly happening over the years, or was it with a couple of major updates? I believe it's a little bit of both. Honestly, like, content was added over time, but the game truly began turning in the right direction with its one Tamriel free update back in 2016. An update that completely rebalanced every aspect of the game and allowed players to group up together regardless of alliance or level. Ever since then, it's been nothing but good, with minor exceptions such as how they expanded the dreaded Crown Store and bumped up monetization in the game. But overall, thanks to the developers' interaction and devotion with the community, the state of the game as of making this video is a fantastic MMO and Elder Scrolls experience that has not only redeemed itself over the years, but has also redefined the entire franchise and industry as a whole. So, let's wrap this video up. It's 2020. The game just celebrated its 6-year anniversary. Should you pick up the Elder Scrolls Online and just give it a try? Absolutely yes. If you're into either MMOs, such as World of Warcraft, or even Destiny, that item grind, that grind for the best gear is definitely there. Or an Elder Scrolls fan that has just been resenting ESO for the longest time, or even people who picked it up at release and had a bad taste from it. Yes, absolutely you should pick it up, and if you like it, invest in the DLC because it only gets even better. Greymoor is about to come out, which has us returning to Skyrim, and I have nothing but high expectations for it, and I know they're going to do great despite the current corona situation going on. But I'm very optimistic for this game's future, and I'm probably going to stick it out till the very end because I love this game. I poured a stupid amount of time into this game. I have probably 300 hours on PC and probably even more on PS4 because that's what I played when this game came out, and so on. So if you're looking for a game to play during this whole hell on earth situation going on right now, absolutely pick up Elder Scrolls Online. It has one of the best communities that you will ever find in a video game. Just reach out in the world chat and hook up with people. Not the hookup you're thinking about, but like meet people and get into a guild, and you'll just be wrapped up into the experience. That's what happened with me, and it's just a fantastic game right now. And as I said, I'm very optimistic for this game's future. I don't see how they could screw it up. But yeah, that's all I have to say about ESO for now, at least. And I'm probably gonna release a video on when Greymore comes out in like a month. Yeah, they delayed it because of COVID-19. But yeah, that's all I got to say for now. I'll probably do, if you liked the structure of this video, let me know in the comments. Like the video, share it. Anything helps. And yeah, I might do more of this in the future. I'm looking at Fallout 76 on my desktop, and I think I want to do a video where I get really angry at a video game. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And for now, that's all I have to say. So goodbye and stay safe out there.